The last question I want to ask about your time during the war was some of your coverage in April of 1987. There was a moment at a Palestinian refugee camp in Beirut, where you sneak into this camp to do some reporting, and you've won awards based off this this reporting. Can you talk a little bit about what that moment was like and what you were reporting on?
Sure, it was one of the many maneuvers. The Syrians, who were by then heavily deployed inside Beirut, decided to kind of redeploy, kind of disengage from around the camps, and they put the Shiite Amal militia in charge of the surroundings of the camps. And the camps were under siege for like 3 or 4 months. And reports were filtering into Beirut. And at the time, there was so-called stability. The Syrians were around, yet not around. The Blue Note had just launched its opening on McHool Street. There was the back street. There were pubs and restaurants. And, it was really eerie to think that, less than 2 miles away, there were these civilians under siege, and we began hearing stories about starvation and writing stories about starvation. And so the militiamen around the camp would allow the women every Friday afternoon to leave the camp and to do some grocery shopping, and to get to the shopping area where they had like vegetable push carts and produce vendors. They had to walk across a wasteland that was about 200 to 300 meters at the most. And for fun, the militiamen would snipe at them. And by the time the 19th woman was dead, Marie Colvin and I, the late Marie Colvin and I, sitting at the Blue Note, decided that this is something we have to cover. We can't let this go on. So she went on her own with her driver into the camp. And there, I don't want to get into what Marie did, but I had to convince my editors that this was a story that we had to cover. And they were nervous. And I said, look, one of your correspondents left a little bullet vest behind. It was a tiny white bullet vest. And what was written on it was last chance. I said, look, as a compromise, I'll wear this bullet vest under my clothes. And I went in dressed in shabby long clothes, pretending to be a refugee woman. And I lined up with the women as they, carrying their groceries. They were getting ready to walk across this wasteland covered with reddish sand. And I told the woman, let me help you. I carried oil, I carried eggs, and I had little notebooks stuffed inside my sweater. And as we came in, of course, they shot at the women. I can't remember if someone was killed that day. I can't remember. But one of the militia, one of the Amal militia women or girls who did a body search, she said, what are all these notebooks? And they had little flowers on them. I had bought them from a grocery store. And I said, I'm getting these for my niece so she can have something to do. And that's it. And I went in. I had established contact with a hospital there through one of the Palestinian factions. And I planned to spend the night there. So I could spend at least 24 hours or more reporting on what was actually happening. And as soon as we walked in, some of the women from fright, they started throwing up. Some of the little girls started crying. And I latched on to a couple of children, and I said, please lead me to that hospital. And they did, and there was Pauline Cutting, the British nurse, who had alerted us to the Sabra and Shatila massacres. There was, I think, a Norwegian male nurse, there was a British nurse, and other Palestinian doctors. And there was not a person in that camp who was not on crutches. And I interviewed, until I collapsed from fatigue, interviewed women, I interviewed men who were recovering, I interviewed these two girls who would be sent out from the other end of the camp and jump over from a high ledge to go get medical supplies. I mean, these were the real heroines. They were like, 10 or 11 years old. And I think the Norwegian nurse gave me a couple of rolls of film that, again, I pushed into my vest. And I walked back. I had agreed with a driver to come and collect me late Saturday afternoon. And that's what I did. I didn't tell any of my colleagues or my friends that I was doing that. And I came out and I wrote the story. And although you're never supposed to start a story with a quote, I couldn't get out of my mind this old Palestinian woman who rolled her tea leaves to smoke because there were no cigarettes. And she said, with every mouthful of food, there were buckets of blood. This for me kind of crystallized what these women were going through.